Cook for my entire family tomorrow. Start at 3 a.m., my daughter-in-law Kristen ordered, not even bothering to look up from her phone. Make sure everything is perfect this time. I nodded and then I booked a one-way ticket to Hawaii. The next day, 40 hungry relatives would find an empty kitchen and a little surprise I'd left just for her. If you're watching this, make sure to subscribe and tell me where you're tuning in from. But first, let me back up and tell you how I ended up planning the most satisfying revenge of my 64 years on this earth. It was a Friday evening when Kristen cornered me in what used to be my own kitchen. Yes, you heard that right. 4 years ago, after my husband Frank died, I made the mistake of selling my beautiful 3-bedroom home and moving in with my son Robert and his wife. They'd convinced me it would be better for everyone I could help with the kids, pitch in for expenses, and we'd all live happily together. What a joke that turned out to be Margaret, Kristen said, using my full name like I was a child being scolded. The family reunion is tomorrow. 43 people are coming and I need everything ready by noon. She finally looked up, her manicured nails tapping against her phone case. That means you start cooking at 3 o'clock in the morning. No excuses this time. Those words hit me like a slap. No excuses this time. As if I'd ever failed her before. I'd been cooking, cleaning, babysitting, basically running her entire household for 4 years while she pranced around, pretending to be a social media influencer. Kristen, I said carefully, I'm 64 years old. Starting at 3 a.m. seems a bit what? She snapped. Too much work for someone who doesn't pay rent. Someone who eats our food and uses our electricity. She stepped closer. I could smell her expensive perfume. Face it, Margaret, she said coldly. This is the least you can do to earn your keep. Something in me shifted right then. It wasn't anger. I'd already moved past anger months ago. What I felt was something deeper, clearer. Of course, I said sweetly. I'll start at 3 a.m. sharp. She smiled, that fake, practiced smile she wore like makeup. Good, and Margaret, don't mess up the timing like you did at Easter. People actually matter at this one. After she click-clacked away in her designer heels, I stood there in that kitchen, my kitchen, the one bought with my money, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled. Because Kristen had just made a fatal mistake. She'd pushed the wrong woman too far. I pulled out my phone, opened the travel app and scrolled. Hawaii looked lovely this time of year. The next flight to Honolulu left at 6 a.m. Saturday morning. Perfect timing. You might think I was crazy for making such a dramatic decision. But let me paint you the full picture of my life since moving in with Robert and Kristen. When Frank died, I was drowning in grief, in loneliness, and in medical bills. His cancer treatments had drained our savings, and the house felt unbearably empty without him. So when Robert suggested I sell and move in with them, it felt like a lifeline. Mom, we need you, he'd said, holding my hands across the kitchen table. The kids need their grandmother close. And honestly, we could use help with the mortgage. So I sold the house Frank and I had built our lives in. The house where we'd raised Robert. The house filled with 35 years of memories. I gave them $200,000 from the sale, enough to pay off their mortgage completely. I thought I was investing in family. But what I really bought was 4 years of servitude. It started small. Could you pick up the kids from school since you're not working? Could you cook dinner since you're home anyway? Could you do the laundry since the kids have so many activities? Before I knew it, I'd become their live-in maid, cook, and babysitter, while Kristen spent her days at the spa or shopping with friends. I was scrubbing toilets and ironing Robert's shirts. When they went on vacations paid for with the money I'd help them save, I stayed home to watch the house. The worst part wasn't even the work. It was the disrespect, like when Kristen redecorated the guest room, my room, without asking. Tossing out the framed photos of Frank I'd kept on the dresser. It looked so cluttered, she said with a shrug. Or when she started introducing me to her friends as Robert's mother. She helps out around the house, as if I were some hired help instead of family. And then last month, I overheard her on the phone with her sister. I don't know how much longer I can deal with her. She's just so old-fashioned. Everything's a production. I can't wait until we can afford to put her in one of those nice senior communities. That's what I heard Kristen say, standing in my bedroom that Friday night. I methodically packed a suitcase. Not everything, just enough for a week in paradise. I didn't want to tip them off. As I folded my favorite sundress, the one Kristen had once mocked as too bright for someone your age, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. FREEDOM. I booked a suite at the Grand WY Resort. Ocean view. Spa services included. The cost would have horrified the old Margaret, the one who clipped coupons and fretted over every penny, but that version of me was about to disappear forever. At 2:30 a.m., I tiptoed downstairs and left my masterpiece on the kitchen counter. Not a grocery list. Not cooking instructions. Something far more interesting. Then I called a taxi and slipped out into the pre-dawn darkness. By the time Kristen woke up, expecting the smell of bacon frying, I was already 30,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean sipping champagne and watching the sunrise. The look on her face when she discovered what I'd left behind would be worth every penny. The taxi driver had been surprisingly chatty for such an early hour at airport, he confirmed as I settled into the back seat with my single suitcase. Yes, please. And there's an extra 20 if you can get me there quickly. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Running away from home, are we? Something like that, I said with a small smile. Watching my son's house fade into darkness, the house I'd helped them keep, where I'd spent for years shrinking myself smaller and smaller just to fit into their idea of a grateful mother. At the airport, I felt like a different person. Maybe it was the early morning air, or maybe it was the delicious secret burning in my chest, but I practically floated through security. The TSA agent glanced at my ID twice. Hawaii, business or pleasure, ma'am? Pure pleasure, I said and meant it. The flight was only half full, which meant I could stretch out and really savor what was happening. As we climbed above the clouds, I imagined Kristen's morning routine. She'd stumble downstairs around 8, expecting to find me elbow deep in preparation for her precious family reunion. Instead, she'd find my letter. That letter, I'd spent 3 hours crafting it the night before, making sure every word was perfect. Not cruel, I'm not a cruel person, but honest, in a way I'd never been allowed to be. It began simply, Dear Kristen, I won't be cooking for your family reunion today. In fact, I won't be cooking anything ever again. Then I detailed exactly what I'd contributed to their household over the past 4 years. Not just the $200,000 that paid off their mortgage, but everything else. The groceries I'd bought, the utilities I'd covered, the repairs I'd paid for, the vacations I'd funded with loans that were never repaid. The total was staggering. Even to me, $187,000. But the real gift came in the final paragraph. I consider this debt forgiven in exchange for 4 years of disrespect, ingratitude, and emotional abuse. Where even now, don't bother calling, I'll be impossible to reach for the foreseeable future. P.S. There's bologna in the fridge for sandwiches. You remember how to make those, right? Mom, would you like a complimentary beverage? The flight attendant's voice snapped me back to reality. Champagne, please. I'm celebrating. Special occasion, I smiled. You could say that. As I sipped, I thought about Kristen discovering my letter, about 43 relatives arriving to an empty kitchen, about Robert struggling to explain to everyone why grandma wasn't there. You could say I just got my life back. The champagne itself was cheap airline bubbly, but to me, it tasted like victory. As we flew west toward the rising sun, I closed my eyes and pictured the chaos unfolding back home. Kristen frantically calling grocery stores, trying to find a caterer who could handle 43 people with 4 hours notice. Robert realizing that his mother, reliable, predictable Margaret, had finally reached her breaking point. By now, they'd probably tried calling my cell phone, but I turned it off right after takeoff. Whatever emergency they thought this was, it wasn't mine anymore. For the first time in 4 years, someone else would have to figure it out. The Grandway Resort was everything the website had promised and more. Palm trees swayed in the trade winds. The ocean stretched endlessly blue. And nobody there knew me as anything other than Miss Sullivan, a woman on vacation. First time in Hawaii? The cheerful desk clerk asked as she handed me my room keys. First time doing anything just for myself in a very long time, I admitted. She smiled knowingly. Well, you picked the perfect place for it. The spa is amazing. The restaurants are world class, the desk clerk continued cheerfully. And if you're feeling adventurous, we can arrange anything from helicopter tours to swimming with dolphins. My suite was on the 7th floor with a balcony overlooking the ocean. As I unpacked my small suitcase, I tried to imagine what was happening 3,000 miles away. It would be late morning in Chicago by now. The relatives would be arriving soon, expecting tables groaning under the weight of my homemade dishes. Instead, they'd find chaos. I should have felt guilty. The old Margaret would have been eaten alive by guilt, worrying about disappointing people, causing problems, fretting over what everyone would think. But as I slipped into the new swimsuit I'd hastily bought at the airport gift shop, all I felt was satisfaction. They'd taken my generosity for granted for 4 years, treating me like hired help, who should be grateful for a roof over her head and food in exchange for endless work. Well, now they could see what life was like without their personal servant. My phone had been buzzing nonstop since I'd turned it back on. 17 missed calls from Robert, 12 from Kristen, a string of increasingly frantic texts. I scrolled through them slowly, sipping a Mai Tai on my balcony. Kristen, where are you? Robert, Mom, call me immediately. There's been a misunderstanding. Kristen, this isn't funny. Kristen again, Margaret, people are coming. Robert, Mom, please, whatever's wrong we can fix it. Kristen, I can't believe you would do this to us? And then, one from my granddaughter Lucy, Grandma, where are you? Mom is freaking out and Dad looks like he might cry. Are you okay? That one tugged at my heart. Lucy was 17, old enough to understand that families can be complicated, but still young enough to genuinely worry about her grandmother's well-being. I typed back quickly, I'm perfectly fine, sweetheart. Just taking a little vacation. Love you. Then I turned the phone off again. A waiter appeared beside me. Another Mai Tai, ma'am? Why not? I said with a grin. I'm celebrating my liberation, he chuckled. Divorce? Something like that. As the afternoon sun warmed my face, I thought about the scene playing out in my son's kitchen. Right then, Robert trying to salvage the family reunion. Kristen ranting about my selfish behavior, relatives wondering where the food was. Let them figure it out. Let them call restaurants and grocery stores. Scrambling to piece together a meal for 43 people. Let them finally see how much work I'd been doing all these years while they took it for granted. Tomorrow, I'd start thinking about what came next. But today I was going to enjoy watching the waves, breathing salt air, and feeling the freedom of having no responsibilities except deciding whether to order room service or try one of the resort's restaurants for the first time in 4 years. The only person I had to take care of was me. I finally turned my phone back on Sunday morning, after 2 glorious days of spa treatments, room service, and blissful silence. The message count made me laugh out loud. 40-7 missed calls and 63 text messages. Most were from Robert and Kristen, of course, but there were others too. My sister Dorothy in Wisconsin, confused after getting a call asking if she knew where I was. A few neighbors wondering if I was all right. Even my old friend Beatrice from book club, apparently drafted into the Find Margaret search effort. But it was the voicemail from my grandson Tyler that finally made me call back. Grandma. This is Tyler, his young voice said. I know you're probably mad at Mom, and honestly, I don't blame you. She made Dad call everyone in your address book looking for you. The whole family reunion was a disaster. They ended up ordering pizza. Uncle Mike said he's never seen anything so disorganized in his life. But seriously, are you okay? I'm worried about you, sweet Tyler, 15 years old, and already more emotionally aware than either of his parents, who'd been too busy taking advantage of my kindness to notice they were crushing my spirit. I called Robert first. Mom. His voice was a mixture of relief and anger. Where the hell are you? Do you have any idea what you've put us through? I'm exactly where I told you I'd be, I said calmly. Impossible to reach for the foreseeable future. This isn't funny, Mom. Kristen's been crying for 2 days. The family reunion was ruined. Aunt Susan asked me 15 times where you were, and I had to lie and say you were sick. Why did you lie? I asked. Because I didn't want to tell 43 relatives that my mother had apparently lost her mind. I sipped my coffee, real Kona coffee, not the cheap generic brand Kristen always bought to save money, and watched a pod of whales breach in the distance. Robert, I said quietly. Did you read my letter? There was a pause. Would you like me to continue the rewrite right from their mom? You were clearly upset about something. Did you read it? I asked. There was another pause, longer this time. Yes, he said quietly. All of it, including the part where I listed every cent I've contributed to your household over the past 4 years. Silence, because I have to tell you, son, seeing it all written down was eye-opening. $187,000. And that's not even counting the unpaid labor, of course, Mom. We never asked you to keep track of. No, I cut in. You never asked me to keep track because you never intended to pay me back. You saw me as a convenient ATM who also happened to cook and clean. That's not fair, he said sharply. You're family. Family helps each other. You're absolutely right, I replied. Family does help each other, which is why I'm helping you now. I'm teaching you how to be independent. Consider it a gift. I could hear Kristen in the background, her voice shrill and furious. Robert tried to muffle the phone, but I still caught snippets. Tell her she has to come back. This is ridiculous. She's being selfish. When Robert came back on the line, his voice was strained. Mom, whatever this is about, we can work it out. Just come home. Home? I laughed, and it felt good to laugh. Robert, I don't have a home there. I have a room in your house, where I'm expected to be grateful for the privilege of working myself to death for people who don't respect me. That's not, we do respect you, he said quickly. Your wife called me old-fashioned and cluttered. I reminded him. She redecorated my room without asking and threw away the pictures of your father. She's talked about putting me in a senior community like I'm some burden she can't wait to dump. Another long silence. I didn't know she said those things. Robert murmured, of course you didn't, I said softly. Because you stopped seeing me as a person a long time ago. I became furniture that occasionally cooked dinner. The truth hung between us, heavy, painful. Undeniable, that afternoon, I was lounging by the pool when my phone rang again. This time, it was Kristen. For some reason, I decided to answer. Margaret. Her voice was ice cold. I think we need to have a conversation about your little tantrum. Tantrum? I kept my voice calm. I prefer to think of it as a well-deserved vacation. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? What you've done to me? I took a slow sip of my pineapple smoothie. I imagine you actually had to work for a weekend. How novel, I had to order pizza for 43 people. She snapped. My entire extended family thinks I'm incompetent because my mother-in-law abandoned us. I prefer the term resign my position. This isn't a joke, Margaret. She barked. I called caterers, restaurants, even the grocery store deli. Nobody could help on 4 hours' notice. I was humiliated. Now you know how I felt, I said evenly. For 4 years. The line went quiet. Then her voice came back, different this time, colder, calculating. Fine, she said. You want to play games? Let's play. You seem to forget that you don't own that house anymore, Margaret. We do. And if you don't come back and apologize for this ridiculous behavior, you might find yourself without a place to live. Something hot and dangerous flared in my chest. Are you threatening to evict me? I'm reminding you of reality, she said smoothly. You sold your house, remember? You gave us all that money. You're dependent on us now, and dependent people don't get to throw tantrums. I stood up, suddenly too restless to sit still. Around the pool, other guests were laughing, sunbathing, ordering cocktails, blissfully unaware that I was in the middle of the most important conversation of my recent life. Kristen, I said carefully. There's something you don't know about that money I gave you. A pause. What are you talking about? The $200,000 I used to pay off your mortgage, I said. That wasn't from the sale of my house. Silence. That money came from a separate account and inheritance Frank left me that I never told anyone about. The money from selling the house? That's sitting in investments, earning interest. I could practically hear her brain spinning, trying to piece it together. You see, Frank was a very careful man, I continued. He knew large financial transactions within families could cause problems later. So he made sure everything was properly documented. Legal loan agreements, proper interest rates, everything above board. I don't understand. She whispered. It means, dear Kristen, I said gently, that I'm not dependent on you at all. In fact, it's quite the opposite. That mortgage-free house you're living in? I can call in that loan anytime I want. The silence stretched so long, I thought she'd hung up. You're lying, she finally said. Am I? Check the paperwork, I said lightly. It's all there in black and white, a personal loan from Margaret Sullivan to Robert and Kristen Sullivan, secured by the property at 2847 Maple Street. I even charged interest a very reasonable rate, mind you. Frank would be proud of my business sense. When she finally spoke again, her voice was small. What do you want? I looked out at the ocean, the endless blue horizon stretching forever toward all the possibilities I'd forgotten existed. What I want, I said softly, is to finish my vacation in peace. What you want, I said evenly, is to figure out how you're going to run your household without me. Because Kristen, I'm not coming back. This time, I hung up first. The call from Robert came at 6 in the morning, Hawaii time, which meant it was 11 a.m. in Chicago. He'd clearly been stewing over my conversation with Kristen for the better part of today's. Mom, we need to talk. His voice sounded different, tired, defeated in a way I'd never heard before. Good morning to you too. Son, I said lightly. Kristen told me about the loan paperwork. About the money. Is it true? I stretched in my hotel bed, watching the sunrise paint the ocean gold. Every word, I said. Why didn't you tell me? Because you never asked where the money came from, I replied. You just took it and assumed I was giving it out of some maternal obligation to bankrupt myself for your benefit. There was a long pause. That's fair, Robert. Your father spent the last year of his life making sure I'd be protected. He set up accounts, wrote legal documents, even recorded video messages explaining his wishes. He knew that grief makes people vulnerable, and he was determined that no one would take advantage of me. I hesitated, then added quietly, not even his own son. The pain in Robert's voice almost broke my resolve, almost. Especially not his own son, I said. Frank knew how charming you could be when you wanted something. Jesus, Mom, he muttered. What kind of son does that make me? The kind who lost his way, I said softly, but still has time to find it again. I heard him take a shaky breath. She's been saying things about you. About the situation. I think I've been hearing what I wanted to hear instead of what was actually happening. And what do you think was actually happening? I asked. I think we turned you into a servant in your own home, he said quietly. I think we took your money, your work, your love, and gave you nothing back but a place to sleep. There it was. The truth, finally spoken out loud. Robert, I said. For 4 years I've been waiting for you to see me. really see me, not as a convenient solution to your problems, but as your mother, someone who deserves respect and kindness. I'm seeing you now, Mom, he said. And I'm ashamed of what I see. Good, I replied. Shame means you still have a conscience. Are you ever coming home? I looked around my suite at the fresh flowers the housekeeping staff brought daily, at the ocean view that never got old. I don't know yet, I admitted. But Robert, if I do, things will be very different. Whatever you want, whatever you need will make it right, he promised. It's not about what I want from you anymore, I said gently. It's about what you need to do for yourselves. You and Kristen need to learn how to run your own lives without someone else doing the heavy lifting. After I hung up, I sat on my balcony for a long time thinking about forgiveness, fresh starts, and whether some bridges could be rebuilt stronger than before. You look like a woman with a story, said a voice beside me later that afternoon. I turned to see a man at the neighboring table as I waited for my lunch at the resort's oceanfront restaurant. He was about my age, silver-haired, kind-eyed, and handsome in that weathered, outdoorsy way that suggested a life well lived. Don't we all? I replied, smiling. Jim Nakamura, he said, extending his hand. Retired teacher from Oahu, and you're either on the world's most relaxing vacation or running away from something. Margaret Sullivan, it's definitely both, I said, laughing. He grinned. Mind if I join you? I hate eating alone, and you look like excellent company. Over lunch, I found myself telling him the whole story, not just the recent drama, but everything. The 40 years of marriage to Frank, raising Robert. The slow erosion of my independence after Frank's death. 4 years of quiet servitude. And finally, the great escape. Jim listened without judgment, asking thoughtful questions and occasionally shaking his head in sympathy. So you're a fugitive from your own family, he said when I finished. More like a refugee, I corrected with a small smile. And what's the plan now? Besides enjoying paradise indefinitely? Honestly, I said, I don't know. For the first time in my adult life, I get to figure out what I want instead of what everyone else needs from me. It's terrifying and wonderful all at once. Exactly, he leaned back, studying me with those intelligent eyes. Can I make a suggestion? Please, don't go back until you're sure you want to, not because you feel obligated to. You've earned the right to be selfish. That evening, Jim took me to a local restaurant his daughter had recommended. It wasn't touristy, just good food and the kind of place where locals gathered to talk story, as he called it. I moved here after my wife died, he explained over fresh ahi. Thought I'd stay 6 months, get my head straight, then go back to the mainland. That was 8 years ago. Do you regret it? I asked. He smiled. Best decision I ever made. I discovered who I was when I wasn't trying to be who everyone else needed me to be. As we walked along the beach afterward, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not just attraction, though there was definitely that, but possibility. The possibility that my life wasn't over at 64. That there were still adventures to be had, connections to be made, laughter to be shared. Margaret, Jim said as we reached my hotel, I hope this doesn't sound too forward, but would you like to have dinner tomorrow? There's a sunset cruise I think you'd enjoy. I thought about the old Margaret, the one who would have come up with 17 reasons why it wasn't appropriate to go on a date so soon. After running away from home, I'd love that, I said. And as I smiled up at him, I realized I was falling in love with both Hawaii and a man named Jim. Meanwhile, my former life was apparently imploding spectacularly. The full story came from my granddaughter Lucy, who called Wednesday evening in tears. Grandma, everything's falling apart here. What's happening, sweetheart? I asked gently. Mom and Dad had this huge fight. I mean huge. Dad found out some stuff about Mom that he didn't know before. I settled deeper into my chair, sensing this was going to be a long conversation. What kind of stuff? Remember how Mom always said she couldn't work because someone needed to be home with us kids? Yes, I said slowly. Well, Tyler and I found out she's been working part-time at this boutique for 3 years getting paid cash so Dad wouldn't know. Interesting, I murmured. Why didn't your father know? Because she told him the money came from you. Like, when she bought that expensive purse last month, she said you gave her the money for it. But you were already gone by then, so Tyler and I knew she was lying. My blood went cold. Lucy, how much money did she tell your father came from me? I don't know exactly, but I heard them fighting about it. Dad said he thought Mom was being too hard on you because you were being so generous. He felt guilty that you were spending your savings on us. The scope of Kristen's manipulation was breathtaking. She'd been stealing from her own family while making my son believe I was voluntarily impoverishing myself for their benefit. There's more, Grandma, Lucy continued. Dad hired someone to look into the house loan thing you talked about. And it turns out Mom knew about it the whole time. She had copies of all the paperwork hidden in her closet. Oh, Lucy. Dad moved out yesterday. He's staying at Uncle Mike's, and Mom keeps crying and saying, "It's all your fault, you ruined everything by leaving." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of my son's broken marriage even though I knew I wasn't responsible for Kristen's choices. "Sweetheart, I need you to listen to me carefully," I said. "None of this is your fault or Tyler's fault. And it's not really my fault either. Your parents need to work out their problems themselves. But are you ever coming home?" Lucy asked softly. "Dad keeps asking, and I think he really needs you right now." That tugged at my heart, but I thought about Jim, about the life I was starting to build here, about the woman I was finally becoming. "I don't know yet, Lucy," I said honestly. "But no matter what happens between your parents, you and Tyler are always welcome to visit me here. In fact, I'd love that." "Really?" she said, surprised. "Even with everything that's happened," I told her. "Especially because of everything that's happened. You're my grandchildren. That doesn't change just because the adults in your family have made a mess of things." After we hung up, I sat staring out at the ocean for a long time. Jim found me there about an hour later. "Still processing the news? A penny for your thoughts?" he asked gently. I sighed. My daughter-in-law has been systematically lying to my son for years, and now their marriage has imploded. I should feel vindicated. "But mostly, I just feel sad." "Sad for your son?" he asked. "Sad for all of them," I said quietly. "Even her, in a way. She must have been pretty miserable to go to such lengths to deceive everyone." Jim sat beside me and took my hand. "You know what I think?" he said. "What?" "I think you're exactly where you need to be." The call that changed everything came Thursday morning from a lawyer in Chicago, whose name I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Sullivan, this is David Chen from Walsh, Patterson and Associates," the man said politely. "I represented your late husband, Frank, in some legal matters. I'm calling because recent events have triggered certain provisions in his estate planning." I sat up straighter. "What kind of provisions?" "Mrs. Sullivan, your husband anticipated that you might face pressure from family members regarding financial matters after his death. He established what we call a protection protocol that activates under specific circumstances." "I don't understand," I said. "One of those circumstances," he explained, "is if you're forced to live away from your primary residence for more than 30 consecutive days due to financial coercion or emotional abuse by family members." My heart started to beat faster. "And you've been in Hawaii," he continued, "for 8 days now. If you choose to stay there for 22 more days," the lawyer said, "a trust worth $1.2 million will be released to you, along with a property your husband purchased in your name that you don't know about." I nearly dropped the phone. "What property?" "A beachfront condo in Maui, fully paid for, held in trust, with instructions to reveal it only if you ever needed an escape route. Your husband was very thorough in protecting your interests, Mrs. Sullivan." The room seemed to spin around me. Frank had planned for this before he died. Somehow, he'd known I might one day need saving from our own son. "Mr. Chen," I managed, "are you telling me my husband bought me a house in Hawaii without telling me?" "He bought you freedom, Mrs. Sullivan," the lawyer said gently. "The house was just the delivery method." When the call ended, I sat there staring at the ocean, trying to process what I'd just learned. Frank had been more worried about my future than I'd ever realized. The business he sold in his final years must have been worth far more than he'd let on. And he'd used those funds to build this safety net. The trust meant I'd never have to worry about money again. The condo meant I could stay in Hawaii permanently if I wanted to. But what it really meant was that Frank had loved me enough to plan for a future where I might have to choose myself over family obligation. My phone rang again. This time, it was Robert. "Mom, I need to tell you something about Kristen." "I already know about the boutique job and the lies about the money," I said softly. "There's more." His voice sounded broken. "I found out she's been in contact with a lawyer about having you declared incompetent. She wanted to get power of attorney over your assets." The final piece clicked into place. Kristen hadn't just been using me as free labor, she'd been preparing to take full control of my life and finances. "Robert, listen to me carefully," I said. "I'm going to tell you something that will change how you see everything that's happened." I told him about the lawyer's call, about Frank's protection protocol, about the trust and the condo, and how his father had somehow known this exact scenario might play out and made sure I'd be safe. When I finished, there was only silence. Then Robert said quietly, "Dad knew. Somehow he knew this would happen. Your father was a very wise man," I replied. "Mom," Robert said, his voice thick with guilt, "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I didn't see what was happening. I'm sorry I let her treat you that way. I'm sorry I became the kind of man Dad felt he needed to protect you from." For the first time since this whole ordeal began, I cried. 3 months later, I was standing on the lanai of my new condo in Maui, watching Jim tend to the little garden he'd insisted on planting for me. The plumeria should bloom in spring, he called out, wiping his hands on his jeans. And the mango tree maybe a few years from now, planning to stick around that long? I teased. He straightened and gave me that smile that still made my heart skip. Margaret Sullivan, he said. I plan to stick around until you get tired of me, and maybe not even then, I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. The decision to stay in Hawaii hadn't been a difficult one once I saw the condo Frank had chosen for me. It was perfect, small but comfortable, with space for guests and a view of the ocean that felt like peace itself. The community garden had already brought me new friends. My phone rang again. It was Lucy. Grandma, guess what? Dad bought me and Tyler tickets to visit you for spring break. That's wonderful, sweetheart. I can't wait to show you around. And Grandma, she added, Dad wanted me to tell you something. He and Mom are getting divorced, but it's okay. He's happier now. We all are, actually. After we hung up, I stood on the balcony for a long time, reflecting on how much had changed. Robert really was happier. He'd moved into a smaller apartment, learned to cook for himself and the kids, and started therapy trying to understand how he'd lost his way so completely. Kristen had moved back in with her parents and was working full-time for the first time in years. The divorce was moving forward without drama, though she'd made one last desperate attempt to contest Frank's trust, claiming I'd manipulated him. That lawsuit lasted exactly 1 week before her lawyer told her to drop it. The best part was that my relationship with my grandchildren had actually grown stronger, without the toxic tension between their parents. We could just love each other freely and fully. You look happy, Jim said, joining me on the lanai with 2 cups of coffee. I am happy, I told him, smiling. For the first time in years, I'm exactly where I want to be, with people who value me for who I am, not for what I can do for them, he grinned. Any regrets about your dramatic exit? I thought back to that fateful Friday morning when I chose freedom over servitude and smiled. When I finally said no to being taken for granted? No regrets. Not a single one. Sometimes you have to burn the bridge just to realize you were always capable of flying. Jim lifted his coffee cup with a smile. To flying, then, to flying, I echoed, clinking my cup against his dot as the sun melted into the Pacific, washing the sky in shades of pink and gold. I thought about how many sunsets I'd missed during those 4 long years of trying to be indispensable to people who didn't truly see me. I'd spent so much energy trying to earn love that should have been freely given. But that time wasn't wasted, not anymore. At 64, I'd finally learned that it's never too late to choose yourself. Never too late to demand respect. Never too late to begin again. And the best revenge? It wasn't making them suffer. It was making myself happy, and I was truly, deeply, finally happy. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.